The economy. It's kinda poppin' right now. In a way. So I think that it's the perfect time to introduce my new and unique business venture. Sharks. We all love sweatpants and sweatshirts, and yet there aren't any stores out there that cater to just selling these products. We have stores that specialize in liquor, we have stores that specialize in guns, but we don't have any stores that specialize in just selling sweatpants and sweatshirts. That's why I want to give you all the chance to invest in my new store called The Sweatshop. Okay, so the pitch didn't go as well as I'd hoped it would. Looks like I'm just gonna have to stick to my day job. Japan Inc. is a pretty unique manga compared to all the others I've covered on this channel so far. Japan Inc. is a Benkyo and Jitsumu manga that provides a general overview of the Japanese economy and various aspects of how the economy works. And now, for a reading from the Webster's Dictionary. Really, this early? Today's word, Benkyo and Jitsumu. Benkyo refers to study manga, where the point of the manga is for the reader to learn while reading. In the case of Japan Inc., the manga teaches you about the Japanese economy and how it works. This type of manga began to emerge in the 1980s and 90s, due in part to parent groups pushing back against manga, seeing it as having no benefit to children and even being harmful. Companies also hoped that producing items such as employee handbooks and instruction manuals in manga form would help to keep the readers engaged with the information being taught to them. Now, Jitsumu refers to practical manga, which is very similar to Benkyo. Jitsumu manga is manga made with purpose, and these types of publications began appearing in the 1980s and 90s, again due to public pushback against manga. Publishers also found it to be potentially lucrative considering the insane amounts of manga being read in Japan at the time. Jitsumu manga covered all kinds of topics from law, real estate, up-to-date info on the stock market, and economics. Obviously, these manga tend to be highly niche and were usually published in newspapers and magazines dealing with the topics that they covered. And with that, we now conclude our reading of the Webster's Dictionary. Japan Inc., An Introduction to Japanese Economics, is based on the book Zimi no Nihon Keizai Yumon, published in 1986 by the newspaper Nihon Keizai Shinbunsha, who also published the manga in 1986 as well. The version of the manga I read was the 1988 University of California Press Edition, translated by Betsy Shiner, with introduction by Peter Dews. The author of this manga is an artist that I've talked about a number of times on this channel before, Shotaro Ishinomori. So I'm just going to again briefly summarize his life and career. Born January 25th, 1938 in Tomo, Japan. His career as a mangaka started in 1954 with the release of Niku Tenshi. 1956 saw him moving to Tokyo to focus on his manga career and becoming an assistant of Osamu Tezuka. His first notable work came about in 1964 and was Cyborg 009, which ended up being a huge hit, continuing publication until 1981. In the 1970s, he became highly involved with tokusatsu shows designing characters such as Kamen Rider in 1971 and Himitsu Sentai Go Ranger in 1975. He also created various manga series that go along with these TV shows. He continued creating various tokusatsu works into the 1980s and 90s, along with other manga such as Japan Inc. Unfortunately, on January 28, 1998, Ishinomori died of heart failure in Tokyo. Moving on to the story, there are 6 chapters of Japan Inc. that cover various aspects of the Japanese economy and economic practices that affect it. All of these chapters present a story that highlights which aspect of economics it wants to cover, and centers mainly around 2 employees of the fictional Mitsutomo Trading Company. Kudo, who is an upstanding economist, and Sugawa, who cares more about profits than morals, and is willing to do whatever it takes to enact his financial schemes. The first chapter is about international trade relations, specifically a very topical exploration of the controversy between the US and Japan over the import of Japanese cars. The US wants Japan to limit its exports due to pressure from US automakers. The Japanese automaker Toei-san, wonder who that could be, wants to start domestically making cars in the US, so they turn to the Mitsutomo Corporation for a solution. The second chapter covers the effects inflation has on companies and cities. This chapter sees a former shipbuilding town suffering due to inflation and desperately searching for a solution. Mitsutomo gets involved when Sugawa wants to take advantage of the situation to build an amusement park in the town. The third chapter deals with how global politics can affect the Japanese economy. It tells the story of a Middle Eastern country coming to Mitsutomo in order to ask for the continuation of a joint oil project that the two had started decades earlier. Mitsutomo, however, wants out of the project. The third chapter mainly goes over the origins of that project and why it went so wrong. The fourth chapter is about deficit financing and social welfare. Mitsutomo is looking to invest into a retirement home project. Meanwhile, due to the recession, the government is debating whether to issue a deficit bond to bail out the economy. The fifth chapter covers speculative financing and the dangers that come with it. It sees Sugawa trying to bail the Mitsutomo Corporation out of some bad investments after the president of an influential bank in Milan turns up dead. The final chapter covers the possible future of the Japanese economy and where it is going in the world stage. It also contains an explanation of how the economy works in getting us products and services. The final chapter focuses on the possibilities of the service and agricultural industries, and ends with Kudo using a pencil to explain how the economy actually works and how it affects us. The manga ends by saying to the reader that the future of the Japanese economy is bright and great. Yep, sure is. Wait, when did this manga come out again? 1986? Oh no. Okay, so things might not have turned out as rosy as they may have imagined it would, but let's not dog on them for that. The economy is unpredictable after all. Yep, it's a real bitch. Anyway, let's get on with the review. Starting with the art, it was good. It's Ishinomori, so of course I would enjoy it. It does look a bit different, however, in comparison to his earlier works that are highly reminiscent of Osamu Tezuka. The manga has a cartoony realistic look that was pleasant. Now, there was some slapstick in the manga, and when those moments occurred, the art became highly cartoony, which really helped to sell it. Now, Japan Inc. was surprisingly dynamic for a manga about the Japanese economy. There were a number of interesting shots and angles spread throughout the manga, keeping the reader engaged. The movement found throughout the manga was also well done. There was some heavy use of motion lines which accentuated these movements. There were also a number of moments throughout the manga that are supposed to be tense, and the art works really well to sell these moments. The panel layouts in these tense moments were dynamic, and there were even changes that occurred in the background, hinting at the eternal thoughts or feelings of a particular character in that moment. It's a small detail that really adds a lot to the manga overall. Now, related to movement, I just wanted to mention that there were a number of great transitions that occur in the manga. These moments were small, but I really enjoyed them. There were a number of striking panels and moments that occurred in the manga, which were great and memorable. One last thing I wanted to mention, somewhat related to art, is that this manga just reeks of stale cigarettes. This manga looks so 1980s, and it's just so aesthetic that I loved it in a way. Alright, so before explaining my thoughts on the story, let's take a minute to examine if this manga really accomplishes what it sets out to do, and that is to teach. So, did I learn about the Japanese economy? Well, in some areas, yes, but the manga relies too much on giving information through conversations as opposed to action or showing the workings of the concepts that they were talking about. Another problem the manga faces is that a lot of the time they don't go too deep into the topics they are covering, or they even just skip over stuff that regular individuals, like me, would know nothing about. There was also a bit of jargon used in the manga that I did not understand, nor was really explained. The manga also heavily relied on footnotes, but even then, a lot of the time the footnotes felt like they had nothing to do with the actual information being discussed on the page or in the chapter. I will praise some of the stories in the manga because a number of them do a good job at showing how world politics plays into the economy and answering the question as to whether I learned anything while reading this manga or not. Yes, some stuff. I learned more about the economic history of Japan in this manga than I did about actual economic workings outside of the most basic of ideas. Just to highlight how much this manga confused me as to whether I even learned anything substantial or not. Before I even started writing my review, I had to reread the manga for a third time to really process the information. Also, there's an inherent problem with this manga in that most of the information I would reckon is outdated. If you know nothing about the economy, then yes, you're going to learn something here. But if you're like an economist, then I don't think you're really going to get too much out of this, other than it being a historical timepiece from the era of the bubble economy. Moving on to the actual story, it's, okay, so I feel that one could make a manga about the economy interesting, but in the case of Japan Inc., I just don't feel that was all that interesting. There were some exceptions where the drama in the story was good. Stories like the first one where there was a black male subplot, and the fifth chapter that involved murder and the mafia were pretty interesting. It was bold of the manga, however, to show the seedy underbelly of the economic world, which is featured in a number of the chapters. I also liked how the stories didn't just focus on the bigwigs who manipulate the economy. Ishinomori also shows how the common people are affected by changes going on within the economy a few times, which helped to ground the stories a bit for me. Examining the characters, they all fall into these specific traits. Kudo is the moral, by-the-book type of economist, while Sugawa is a bit crooked, at first, who is full of himself, and Akiyama is the wise elder. Now I mention all this because the characters in the story are poorly handled. Kudo is steady in his characterization, but Sugawa loses his edge after the second chapter. Ishinomori also tries to give Sugawa more dimensions by showing his family life and domestic troubles, but they are not that important to the story and are overall a minimal aspect to the manga that ultimately just adds nothing. To me, however, the biggest problem this manga faces is the pacing. It feels like these stories just needed more space to play out. This would have solved the problem of the drama not being that good, because the tension and drama could be better built up over time with more space. Overall, the manga is mediocre and a bit dry. If you're into economics, then I guess check it out. But again, like I said, don't think you're going to get much out of it, other than the historical aspect of the manga. Now, if you're not into economics, then yeah, I don't think you're going to like it. The characters are all one note except for Sugawa, but that's because he changes for no real reason after chapter 2. The drama could have been better handled. If the manga had been longer, then it probably could have improved the drama. Even though the drama was not that good, Ishinomori was good at composing tense scenes, thanks to the dynamic panel layouts and art direction. The art was the best part of the manga for me. The layouts were great, and I especially enjoyed these transitions. Finally, the teaching aspect of the manga could have been better done. They don't go deep enough into most topics, and they breeze over other aspects that I would have wanted to know about. That's why I'm going to be giving Japan Inc. by Shotaro Ishinomori a 5 out of 10. And that's the video. Wait, hold on. There's one last thing I want to say that this manga does have going for it, and it's this. Within the circles of weeb academia, many scholars and philosophers like to muse and postulate who the greatest villain in all of manga is. Well, today, I would like to put that debate to rest, because the greatest villain in all of manga is found within Japan Inc. And that is Ronald Mother Cuckin' Reagan!